Great Smokies National Park and Cape Hatteras National Seashore, Jonathan contributes exceptional expertise to his current position. Originally hailing from Pennsylvania, he is deeply committed to unveiling the mysteries of Mammoth Cave and to interpreting the diverse landscapes found above ground. His dedication and extensive knowledge make him an invaluable asset to both visitors and colleagues. During this presentation, we'll discover the secrets, former ecosystems that were once found at Mammoth Cave National Park. The title presentation, Shark Fossils and Mammoth Cave National Park, and welcome Jonathan.
Well, thank you so much for having me this evening. I get to talk about fossils and I get kind of excited about that, so. Oh, all right. So the program I have is anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes. It will focus on some of the more common fossils we have, as well as some other fossils that we have found with, and labeled since 2020. And I'll kind of tell you how that process came about as well. There's a lot of people on that shark research team who have done a lot more than me, and people on that team that have much more of a breadth of information than I do. So I will tackle as much as I can, but I might not be able to give you all the answers, especially when it comes to Latin and all that stuff. Oh goodness. So fossils can be contentious. One ranger points at a rock and says, "Hey, that's a piece of chert that was sheared off, or common flint." Another ranger says, "No, that's an ammonite." So the culture of fossils is kind of interesting at the cave too, and we'll talk a little bit about that as well. So without further delay, let's go ahead and jump on in this shallow sea. It's hopefully warmer than it is outside. It's actually been a beautiful day today. Let me pull this up for us. All right. So the program I created is kind of a hybrid between my fossil program, and I added some new information. I reached out to peers on the shark research team. A couple of them actually have shark teeth named after them in the past couple of years. There's one called Strigolotus tolesinae, and it's named after one of my best friends, Kelly, who eats, sleeps, breathes Mammoth Cave. Now, I'm not quite at that point, but 8 years, it's a lot of roller coastering. But shark research has been absolutely exciting, fun, and I'm excited to share what I have with you. So when we start talking about the natural history of this area, I'm just going to touch on this rather briefly. We had the Panthalassa Ocean, and we were much closer to the equator. There we are. Let me get out my laser pointer. If you have any kittens, make sure they're not watching. All right, so right about in there. What that looks like on a micro scale, as we zoom into the shallow sea that's about 50 to 60 feet deep, is something that might be very similar to a shallow ocean today. You have coral, you have different species of fish and sharks, and then of course the life cycle of those sharks. Now there's a backstory to this picture actually. There was an artist who found a fin spine and a brain casing and some teeth from this character right here. But near that, they also found some little teeth from this character here. So the artist tried to create a living model of these creatures, as well as show us how this might have been depicted on the walls of Mammoth Cave. Now, where you would see this in the walls of Mammoth Cave is a nice walkway, and then you gotta crawl, and crawl some more, and crawl some more. On this nice sandy crawl, there's some historic signatures. This area is called Specimen Avenue, even before we found this stuff here. It has some other history pertaining to the World's Fair of 1893, where one of the guides actually pulled specimens of gypsum off the wall and sent it to the World's Fair, and he went there as well. Mammoth Cave was on display. But this area kind of shows us that shark fossils a lot of the time aren't very easy to get to, and we'll share some stories about caves we've been into as well. Some good, some not so good. Then we further look at just the state of Kentucky in the mix of things, and you might have seen this map before. We're kind of in that Mississippian plateau area, or Pennyroyal Plateau, if we're going to zoom in even more. And when I talk about the composition of Kentucky, the schools, we do an activity called Shallow Sea, where we talk about animals that might fossilize, animals that might not, but I also throw seaweed and other organic material in so they can understand that there are fossil fuels, not just fossils. So this is a nice little map just to kind of bring us home right into Kentucky. All right, here we go. I'm starting off with the shark because I'm feeling excited. Saevotis striatus. This is like our MVP of what we've been finding in caves. The cool thing about Saevotis striatus is it's one of the species that is found in all three layers of our limestone, the Gherkin, the St. Genevieve, and St. Louis. We even had the opportunity to go to another show cave called Crystal Onyx. And up to this point, I haven't found a lot of shark fragments. You know, you kind of go like, oh, I don't know if I'll find one. We get in there and they're like, yeah, this area might have fossils. And I found a Saevotis tooth right off the bat. Very clear specimens of different species, including the Gilpmanius. So here it is in the wall. I should have got some numbers here to help us correspond to what we're seeing, but it would look very similar to this. Modern great white shark. Not related, but very similar in appearance. And we're at about 70 documented, how does that go? 70 ancient fish species and sharks that are, and about 4 of them are new to science. One's named after the superintendent, one's named after a former cave scientist who still volunteers, one's named after Kelly, then there's another like couple in the mix. But they are very difficult to find if you don't know what you're looking for. I go morel hunting on the surface and now is like prime time apparently. And finding shark teeth is like finding morels though. Once you find 1 or 2 of them, now you're locked in and hopefully you're gonna find some pretty cool stuff. They've been talking about fossils at Mammoth Cave even before 1865, but I find this interesting because what you're seeing is a horn coral on the left there, and we have so many horn coral and brachiopods and crinoids and gastropods, all these different components in the cave. And if you go north about an hour to an hour and a half, I think it's hour and a half to Louisville, and you cross the river there and go to Falls of the Ohio, you see much larger versions of a lot of these. So we are in like this fossil haven here. You'll be walking on a trail and this rock will get uncovered and you'll see horn coral or rugosa or zombie finger as I call it for the kids, because a lot of the times they're weathered and eroded away and they kind of look like fingers. So a tangible reference for the kids. Now this is a lot. I couldn't really break this down into some smaller stuff, but I wanted to give you a smattering of the different things we're finding. This one up here, I believe, is the one that is back in the crawl. You can see barely, there's this little scale bar here. We always bring scale bars, vials, plastic vials with cotton in them, a handkerchief, rock tools, including dental tools. And we'll show you how we do that here in just a little while. We also mark a lot of them with pink flagging tape. So many times you'll be looking for fossils and you'll find like the best specimen. You'll be like, oh, this is great. And then you roll over and realize there's a piece of flagging tape underneath you and somebody already found it. These things happen, you know, but that's the cool thing about this is it's kind of a community that opens it up to volunteers and other people from different divisions. One of my best friends was a guide here. I think he's in his 60s, but that dude is nonstop. When he gets here and volunteers, he is in that cave from like sunrise to sunset looking for shark stuff. So there's been a lot of contributions from different people. And it's the passion of the fossils, not necessarily the getting paid to look for them. So we got our different scientists. What essentially happened is in 2020, yes, COVID, we corresponded with a paleontologist from the University of Maryland, J.P. Hodnett. Now, he's written a lot of stuff on this, and he is actually behind because we've been sending him so many specimens and fossils. So we're waiting on some just to get confirmation on what they are. But because of this cooperation, we're able to say what a lot of these formerly nameless fossils are. We can put meaning and interpretation onto them, and even a name, which makes it better whenever you're trying to interpret it to the public. But you can see different style teeth and cartilage that fossilizes from time to time. That's one of our cave scientists. There's JP right there. This dude is brilliant. His name's Rick Toomey. I always go to him or the Science and Resource Management Division for things about ecology, biology. One gentleman is very good with birds and talks about birds and the changing ecosystems at Mammoth Cave and how that changes the species of birds. So anyway, fossils. So we have to go back, make it a little bit more basic, and then we'll build our way up into some other stuff here. So that is a Saphodus striatus, but look at all these brachiopods here. You probably have some crinoids in this little hash here. And to me, you know, morel hunting on surface and looking for fossils in a cave is great because you really have to have your concentration peaked. And you might find this beautiful fossil here, but you might find, you know, an intact brachiopod, and you just might be taken aback by it. So it's always kind of an adventure. Now, I'll tell you a story about trilobites, actually. We're predominantly Mississippian era. And I've learned that in other parts of the world, if you take the Pennsylvanian era and the Mississippian era, they're referred to as the Carboniferous. So that's something I'm kind of getting used to. But trilobites, I didn't think we had them here. They're, what are they, Ordovician, Devonian? We have 4 of them in Salt's Cave. Now, Salt's Cave is in a different ridgeline and probably started forming around 10 million years ago. It's older cave. So in the entrance of it, as we were making our way down and following the water, we find about 4 trilobite fossils, which is awesome. You know, anytime I say new fossil, it's great. So this is our trilobite. And there are still relatives of them today, including the horseshoe crab. Not horseshoe crab, yes, horseshoe crab, sorry. Hard shell, okay, basic stuff. Here's a little bit of colonial coral or crinoid stems. I'd have to really get into that. So fossils, they have to be covered quickly, covered layers over time. And when they're in a cave, it's the weathering and erosion process that revitalizes our ability to actually see these fossils. And on our domes and dripstones tour route, you go down 280 stairs. There are blastoids. This is one of the only spots where I know of blastoid fossils. And if you're a layman or if you're not familiar with fossils, we will actually show you what these are in a little bit. But yeah, lots of coral. Okay, this is very basic, so we'll get through this. Different types of fossils, we predominantly have molds and cast and replacement, but right here is another one of those contentious ones that we'll talk about here in just a minute. And it's contentious because we even have a cave passage. We'll get there, I'm getting too excited. Trace fossil. There's another little trilobite mold fossil. Here's one of those fossils that gets people talking, the ammonite. Here it is. Okay, so for a while, they have an area in the cave called Sylvan Avenue, or pertaining to Wood Avenue. They contend that this thing that looks like a log is actually petrified wood. Whereas other people, and I kind of lean on the other people's side of things, think it is just a piece of chert. So you have silica in both. But I don't know if we have petrified wood in Mammoth Cave. And I don't want to say 100% surely, but we do have a passage named for it, but some of our passages have interesting backstories. So this is one of my favorite national parks, actually. Petrified forest. Common question the rangers get there. Where are all the trees? Because you go to parks and you're like, okay, what's the weirdest question you get? Where are all the trees? There's a close-up. We do not see this inside Mammoth Cave. We don't even see Jurassic Park memes or insects in amber inside Mammoth Cave. Here we go. Fossils found in Mammoth Cave. Let's take a look and reveal some of these. Dinosaurs? Nah. They were extinct. Mammoths. So there's a huge textbook, and there are about 5 counties, I think 5. With the glacial wash and sediment coming down, we find mammoth tusks. We find, giant ground sloths. Bones of these animals in different counties that are neighbor to us, but not so much right here. It was a mastodon tusk. I apologize. Places like Big Bone Lake, though, yeah, they do have mammoths, and they're trapped in that salty brine. So they were in Kentucky, just not at Mammoth Cave. We were underwater for quite some time. Sea creatures, yes. You can tell this is traditionally made for younger folks, but sea creatures, yes. One of the biggest fossils I found, it was about 5 by 5, 5 feet by 5 feet. And I was on my belly crawling. And this is a great crawl. It was muddy, there was a bat above me, there was a wood rat. And my friend Taylor actually found it and said, look at this is colonial coral. And it's colonial coral that covered the whole wall. I have never seen a fossil that consistent. That was a shark research trip though, and I don't think we found any shark stuff. Sometimes you don't. Sometimes it's just a hole in the ground that you can barely fit into, and you might have, always have somebody on the top to help you out, because there was one cave last year that I didn't think I was getting out of. Sometimes you have to crawl down into the hole, sometimes you have to tie a hand line, but these caves are crazy. Sharks. There again is Saevotis striatus with some crinoid hash around it. And I like this rock right here. That's pretty solid. It sounded like someone was out there. So, again, about 70 different species of shark, ancient fish and shark. For a while, I was on the Great Onyx tour, and I'm walking in with some people, and there's a certain spot with a tooth there. And I thought it was a shark tooth. So I'm like, oh yeah, shark tooth, here it is. But I had to know for sure. So I went to Strigolotus tolosinae. My dear friend Kelly, that I call Strigolotus, she said it was from a ratfish. And ratfish had this big tooth that would be used to crush a lot of these coral components. So we got a lot of different things going on. Now I wish there was the third layer in this. Here's our Saevotis right here. Here's Saevotis again, this is Gilpmanius, I think. And again, there's a lot of different names and a lot of different sharks. The one that was found relatively recently is, the chipmunk shark, Minshew's. The common name's Minshew something, but we call it the chipmunk shark because it was probably about the size of your fist. A shark the size of your fist. To be able to know that that's from this shark, this paleontologist is pretty good. Most recent fossils we found, it was about 2 weeks ago, and I had a break in my day, and I was able to go with the science division into a part of our cave. I'm not even joking. This is 3/4 of the way through our domes and dripstones route. We walked off trail about 2 minutes and we're in this room. You can't stand upright in this room, but we had black lights. I'll show you the difference between black light fossil and just the regular light. We had a lot of people that were versed in finding fossils, including Rick Toomey. And I saw my first pseudoscorpion this day, which is about the size of your thumbnail, really tiny, no stinger. This day, I found about 3 fossils, and everybody was finding stuff. This was like a treasure trove of all these different components from sharks. Now, do I know what they are? I have no idea. Gilkmanius, possibly, but I do not know. They have to be sent up to Maryland. Here's a random advertisement for the state fossil of Kentucky. Brachiopods or brachiopods, I've heard it pronounced both ways. This is probably one of the most common fossils. We were on a crawling tour yesterday, and the ceiling was littered, absolutely littered with fragments from brachiopods. We have found shark fragments in that area as well, but sometimes they're not 5 minutes off trail. Sometimes you're 3 or 4 miles into the cave off of trail on old tourist routes from the 1800s, and you're looking and you're like, wow, this is pretty sharky. And that's what we say that. We're like, oh, this looks sharky. Because, when you get into stuff, you come up with verbiage. And so that area, we will actually go on after hours with some of the other rangers, so that they're aware that we do have shark fossils in pretty unique places in the cave. Coral, calcium carbonate, makes up limestone, makes up tums. So if you have too much acid, you can neutralize it with some calcium carbonate. It works the other way here with weathering and erosion, where the acid breaks down this calcium carbonate in fast or slow manner. There's our colonial coral. You can see this on the historic route. Horn coral. I think one of the best museums I've been in was the Falls of the Ohio Museum, because I didn't know what these look like. I've only seen them in stone, and you Google them. They had a presentation up there that was just phenomenal. And so I even bought their environmental education book up there to see how they interpret these fossils. So crinoids, this is another fossil that we have a lot of, but the tough thing to find is the calyx, or the top part of it. And so we're back yet again, 4 miles into the cave, off trail, somewhere off the beaten path, and we find a calyx. And we're all excited because this is a rarity. We went to Crystal Onyx Cave and found like 6 of them. It was crazy. So, maybe there was a bigger pocket of them. I guess today we could say down the road, but back in the day, further into the ocean, or shallow sea. Blastoids. When we were looking for shark teeth one time, we went into this stream cave. So there's this waterfall, there's block facades on the side. And so we put on our caving gear and we're caving in this water, and it feels great. It's summertime. We look up and we see an Archimedes screw. Typically, when you're in the sandstone caves, which I'm not a fan of, neither was Floyd Collins, for the brittle reason, you get a lot more lycopodium, or a lot of some people call it ancient asparagus fossils. You often find those around coal beds as well. Found a huge fossil in Pennsylvania near the strip mines when I was a kid. And for years, I wondered where it went to, and I went home to Pennsylvania to visit my family, and it's holding a door open. And I'm like, really? Since then, my dad has taken it to an environmental center, though, so glad we can learn from that. But these are all limestone predominantly. All right, now we're gonna get into the how of some of this stuff. And I apologize if there's some elementary questions in here. Okay, this is Rick Toomey. Rick Toomey is my go-to for a lot of stuff. When you look at these walls, what we're looking for are about the size of a Tic Tac sometimes, glossy, dark, textured. And so if we find one, we say, hey, come over here, you wanna check this out? I need your opinion on things. And so we'll look at it, get up real close, and then we might take a black light to it. I kind of had an embarrassing moment the other week when I went on that tour. I found what appeared to be a bone. And it looked like a bone, it felt like a bone. I didn't want to mess with it because it was real brittle. And I showed it to Rick, and he said, I'm gonna do something, and I apologize if I break it. He goes to break it, and it bends. It was a piece of pipe or something that was cut in that area. So, you know, we're just ruling out all these different things, trying to see what is what. We have a black light that's kind of like a mini vacuum cleaner. We'll plug that in and hold it up, and it illuminates very well. And then I have a personal black light, and a lot of the other people do as well. Because if the fossil fluoresces, that at least gives us confirmation that it's, you know, a lot of the time from an animal. Oh, I forgot this was a video.
Can you tell
So,
we can't
Jonathan,
hear?
we're not hearing though.
Yeah. Oh, it didn't play?
No.
We didn't.
Hello?
We saw it playing,
Oh.
but we didn't hear it. If you wanted to share the
I
audio.
kind of figured it. Every time I play videos through Zoom or Microsoft Office, it kind of glitches out a little bit. So I pretty much just covered a lot of what he said. So we'll move on, and we might not play videos. So, all right. Yeah, that's Rick Toomey. And he will talk to you for a very long time. But every time you talk to him, you learn something new. So here's some of the tools that we'll use. We use dental tools. If the fossil was embedded, we'll scrape around it. Maybe use a toothbrush. What's not listed on here is a squirt bottle. And then a lot of the time, we have a retractable post, and we'll put one of the scale bars on the post. That way, okay, I'll tell you this. One time we hiked, was it about 1.5 miles into the woods with a ladder, and we had to crawl down into this cave with the ladder and bring it into the cave with us. There was this beautiful flowstone with this shark jaw, we think, up out of reach, of course. So with the ladder, it was still out of reach. So we had to bring another ladder the next day, but I didn't go that day. Here they were able to get it out, but it came out in fragments, and that happens a lot too. So something else I would add to this list is a handkerchief. As stuff is falling, if you have yourself or someone else hold that handkerchief there, then you can make sure it doesn't become lost in the cave dirt or the cave gravel. So one time, we went down to the river because there was supposedly a big rock that was loose. And in this rock, there was a shark component. So they had to bring a rock saw for that one. And so it was like 2 adults. I guess I'm an adult, but I might have fell into the cave river and explored a little bit, but it was a cool fossil and a great experience. We had a guy from law enforcement with us. We had interpretation, environmental education. There was only like 8 of us, but each division was kind of represented, which was pretty cool. So if more people get into it, even better. Now here is a fluorescing fossil right here. When we take the black light to it, you can see the texture over here as well. But this right here really kind of gives us an idea. So we would take and use those dental tools on this sediment. Yeah, there's a piece of a crinoid right there too. And we would just hold the handkerchief right underneath it. Then we would pop it in a vial with some cotton, and and that would be cataloged and eventually sent to Maryland. Now, what happens is you forget stuff. Things happen. Like last time, we didn't have any of those little vials, so we ended up using what we had. I think it was just like Ziploc bags and stuff, but it works in a pinch. And I always have to point this out because this is one of my favorite little areas as well. We're in the Falls of the Ohio, and look at that cache of fossils. So you think about that cache flat, but if you take it and put it up on a cave wall, sometimes we have scenes in Mammoth Cave that look like that. Now, I think this is Jeffersonville limestone. So it's a little bit older than the limestone that we have here. Crinoids that look like your backbone. This is crazy. I would love to see something like that here, but I might be a little bit freaked out a little bit. I'd be like, oh man, that's H.P. Lovecraft's Beast in the Cave. So all of these different components here. There's a calyx right there. Now, I don't know if that's a real fossil or one of our recreated one, but that is a really good fossil. And there's that, was it Lycopodium, ancient asparagus. We have a huge fossil of this in our visitor center. You get a lot of these fossils near coal fields, especially in slate, which we don't have a whole lot of that in this part of the state. And I've never found a fish fossil, but I would think slate would be a good recipient for that too. Man, we just blasted. And are there any slides that you would like to take a look at again? I kind of got into a flow of things and zipped through, but I wanted to make sure that we shared everything in a clear and concise manner.
Do you all have some of the shark teeth displayed somewhere specifically?
Working on it. I'm with environmental education, and we're trying to get some samples for over here. The best we have arrived at so far, let me see if I have it on me, is one of the rangers did 3D printed models of a Savotus tooth. There it is. So these will glow in the dark. They, I love this. You do a lights out and you say the shark was floating around, he only had one too. You know, kids love that stuff. We are trying to get some, and I'm not sure what the visitor center is up to in regards to shark fossil display, but it's something that needs to happen because within the past couple of years, people got really excited about fossils, and now would be a great time to show some of those fossils. All right, other questions?
So, Jonathan, how long have you been in a fossil hunting? Has that been before you came to Mammoth Cave, or is this something you picked up while you were here?
Growing up, I was always into rocks. And we lived near a state park in Pennsylvania. I was always into nature. I'm terrible with birds. My dad stopped the car and be like, oh, there's a grebe. There's a grebe out there. So I was fortunate enough to grow up. And my dad went to school for forestry, and it wasn't for him, so he joined the military, worked in a prison for a while, but he still always had that love of nature. So we would look for stuff, fossils, mushrooms, all kinds of different things. Now, he loves trees, but I love fungi and other stuff. So if we go walking when I'm home, I'll point out things I know, he'll point out things he knows. But fossils was kind of the 2020 thing. It was weird because we weren't able to go to work, but we had to come up with stuff to do. So our first project was a boundary project, outside walking the boundary in different areas to get an assessment. That was cool. Then this paleontologist, J.P. Hodnett from Maryland University, kind of reaches out and says, hey, I'm understanding that you have fossils. Let's team up with this and kind of figure out what's going on. And so I go with my friend, I go hiking with him. Like I said, he's an older gentleman, but that dude is like the Energizer Bunny. So we'll go into a cave and oh, that's a shark, dude. Oh, that's shark. I'm like, how are you finding all this? After a while, you start to see it though, and it starts to click. But I probably have been doing this since about 2020. But a lot of stories that were good, and some stories, you know, you get sick in the cave sometimes, and an archaeologically sensitive cave, which wasn't fun. But I could not be in that cave. I had to be in there because it was a new cave, you know. But other stuff, curiosities, even about Mammoth Cave. It doesn't have to be about fossils or sharks. Whatever y'all are into.
Mammoth Cave is, I understand, several hundred miles long. How far in do you go? Do you go down as far as you can? And about how far down, straight down, do you find these things?
Well, the fossils are found in 3 layers. Some layers are more productive than other layers. So down by the river, I haven't really found a whole lot of fossils. But if we were to look at that sheet, other people have. We typically find, is it Gherkin or St. I would say St. Genevieve is where we find most of our stuff. And that's the second level down. So you're looking at 140 feet down to about 300. And then the very bottom of the cave kind of goes to 365. Because in River Hall, there's a dividing line between those. So I would say you got to go about 140 to 300 feet down. But here's where it gets weird. Further up on domes and dripstones, you got to go right into the entrance and you'll start seeing fossils.
Wow.
And the first room you encounter is 250 feet down, but it's on a ridge versus down here where 360 feet down is, you know, a different layer. So it all depends on what part of cave you go into. And a lot of the caves we go into aren't even connected to Mammoth Cave. They're referred to as lesser caves, but we don't think of them as lesser.
And what compared to where the ocean is now, about how far above sea level is the entrance to the cave?
Where is our sheet?
I think Owensboro is around 740 or something like that above sea level. It must be
here.
Not too
we
far.
Pull up my topographic map.
Yeah.
I thought it was around there. Okay, I apologize. I'm just syncing up my map here because I used to have a number. Was it 540? This is saying 750. I would say around 700 feet in elevation currently, compared to being totally covered with water 330 million years ago.
So, yeah. Thank you.
Jonathan, I have a question. As an employee there, do you have access to anywhere you want to go in the cave? I know there's probably protected areas, but are you able to explore most of anything you want, in a sense?
Times changed. When I first got here, it was more loosey-goosey. Now you have to fill out a cave access form, and if you go through the interpretation, if you work with science though, you basically can work something out like, hey, you want me to check out this cave, I'm gonna bring a couple other people, we don't want to cave alone. They give you the keys and you go. So how you approach it is what'll give you access. Now, if I wanted to do something in Mammoth Cave, like a side passage or something, I could fill out the cave access form. You're supposed to give 36 hours. But here's where it stinks. If my parents show up on a whim and they want to go on a cave tour, I can't do it because they've changed some things around. So I think if I went to my immediate supervisor though, she would be pretty cool about it.
Okay.
So, Jonathan, you mentioned a lot of the fossils from about 330 million years ago. What kind of temporal range do you have across the different layers of the cave? Are they all around the same time period, or does it span across millions of years?
I would say if we're finding trilobites and you have cave forming 10 million years ago versus 1 to 2 where our main entrance is at, you have some overlap, but you do see some difference in species of sharks between those layers. There's a couple mainstays between them, so they might have carried over to another era. But for the most part, you got 3 distinct layers here. You go to the north side, you get another layer of sandstone, big cliffy, and then you get another layer of limestone, the Haney. And I think Haney might be productive too. So even between the north side and the south side, you even have different geology. You have a different watershed that's going to Barron. And then over here it's going to Nolan, or then the Green River. So I would say, yeah, there's some overlap, but there are different species within each of those 3 levels as well.
But is it still all about 330 million years old in terms of the sediment?
Yes. As far as we know, they were doing something where they were taking the sediment from the cave and mixing it with a barium alkaline solution. And they were using that to see the last time the sediment saw the sun. And so I don't know where that's at in the progress of, I guess it would be called sedimentology. But that might give us some more clues as well. Closer ages, probably.
I know there are 200 miles of cave, but approximately how many square acres is that under? You have an idea? Because I know
Well,
there's so many passages.
Roughest.
Yeah.
Our park is currently 53,000 acres. 53, and then we're getting 551 that has 3 caves that have huge bat populations. We're talking thousands. But the thing is the cave extends outside of the park too. So
Yeah.
I don't know how many more acres I would even guesstimate to how big this cave is, especially if it connects to the 9th largest cave in the world, Fisher Ridge Cave, which is 135 miles long. So our acreage above 53,000 for the park, but that's just the park. That's where a majority of the cave is. But as you get out to the east and even to the southwest a little bit of the park, near our Cedar Sink Trail, there's a 35-mile cave there that hasn't been connected yet either. The Wig Pistol Cave, or system.
Is there water all the way down to the bottom of where the cave has been discovered?
Was there water?
What was that? Sorry.
Is there water all the way down to the bottom of where the cave has been explored?
Yeah.
Do you find water inside the cave everywhere?
Well,
No.
not everywhere. In fact, we're 80% dry, 20% wet. Now, if you get rain like last year that we had at this time, if these are my layers of cave and this is River Hall, this was fully covered. This was, you're not going on a historic tour that day because this was up to the ceiling in the historic. Domes and dripstones, you couldn't get in. There was 4 feet of water in front of the door in the sinkhole. And then our Violet City door, the force of the water actually busted the door open. So that made it interesting. But if you're on Wild Cave, there are pockets of water from time to time. If you get a lot of rain on your way to go to Cathedral Domes, you might be walking in 4 feet of water. Or if you go and you don't have a lot of rain, there might be just a puddle or 2.
So the water is not flowing, it just goes down from the surface, from the rain, and it drops down
Yes.
and keeps going. And where does it go? It just disappears at the end, at the bottom?
Green River.
Green River, yeah.
Yeah, if you think about the cave system, there's all these little rivers and tributaries, and they will kind of congregate. And as they congregate, we have two main springs that go out into the Green River. You have your River Styx and your Echo River. And this is a collection of all the water that was flowing down through the cave, depositing out into the Green River. And it makes for very nice, if you go to a cave spring, a very nice, cool, relaxing, 20-degree cooler pocket of water.
I guess what I'm wondering, I don't know how deep, I still am not clear how deep the cave is from the surface down to the bottom of what's been explored. And is there water at the very bottom there? Are you following me?
The question was, what's the deepest point of the cave? And is there still water down there? Is that right, Bob?
Yeah.
365 feet, and that passage was flooded last year. The water level is dynamic, based on the amount of rain, based on snow melt, and when the cave floods, it's actually beneficial for a lot of the animals down in there, like the eyeless cave fish, Kentucky cave shrimp. But yeah, bottom level, 365. We even used to have a boat tour in that level until 1991. They stopped it. Environmental impact, we had a creature that was almost extinct, the Kentucky cave shrimp, that only exists here. Ooh. So yeah, down at the bottom, we got water.
Is there any hope of ever acquiring the Cub Run Cave that closed down? It's so fantastic.
That cave was up for millions of dollars. My goodness. I heard that cave is one of the most spectacular caves. My coworker Chris is actually from Cub Run, and he's like, if you ever get to go in there, it'll blow so many caves out of the water. In the past couple years, we have opened up Wandering Woods. We're doing Crystal Cave again this year, apparently. We're opening up Crystal Cave, so if that's something you might be into, it might be worth checking out online. Cub Run, I doubt we will ever get. With parks losing more and more funding, we're not gonna have money to acquire that.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I have a bad question. How is the
Yeah.
white nose, that disease, how is that impacting nowadays? I haven't heard lately. Are they good?
White nose syndrome?
Yes.
White nose syndrome. I've been hearing rumors that we're gonna get ready to not have the stations anymore because it's essentially run its course. We're seeing a rise in gray bats and a decline in, what was it, big brown in Indiana. There's a couple of bat species that were really hurt by white nose. And yeah, we still have a population of them, but you will still see white-nosed bats from time to time. I was in one of the lesser caves, and it was like 2 years ago, saw the white crust, saw the crust on the wings. I'm like, that bat's a goner. Now, I have heard that they can treat white nose on a case-by-case thing, but it's like us going to the clinic. When we get home and go out in public again, there's no guarantee we're not going to get sick again. So white nose, I think, is kind of tapered off. If you're worried about bat populations, though, fear not. I think there's a couple caves that were in this new area that we acquired, Coach Cave, James Cave, and there's another thing. They told me that anywhere between 500,000 and 700,000 is what they got on their count. So bat populations seem to be trending upward, and they are migrating because they tagged one, and then 2 days later they found this bat in an Indiana cave. So.
How do living animal populations in the cave affect the fossil hunts? Like, what do you have to be careful for?
So the question is, how do the contemporary wildlife, living wild animals, affect the fossils? Is that more or less?
Yeah.
In the cave?
Yes.
Very minimally. I would say bats, yeah, bats can put some oil on the ceiling and stuff. Cave crickets poop on everything. Fossils are typically in the wall, so a wood rat's not gonna mess with them. Cave beetles are really too small to do anything. So I would say there's not a lot of problems from animals in the cave. And even people were respectful. You know, sometimes you see someone right, you're like, oh, don't do that. I've never seen anybody trying to take a fossil out of the cave. On the trails, we do have a couple rocks where there's exposed horn coral. And there was a chip out of a rock one day, and I'm wondering if someone might have got a souvenir. But for the most part, those fossils are pretty resilient.
Just to extend out the cave any, is there any scuba diving done in the cave area? In the bottom where the water is?
Once. So they put a submersible in. Submersible goes down in from the Echo River Spring, gets stuck.
Oh,
There it
no.
is. They send another submersible down. It gets stuck. Now we have two submersibles. So now they're gonna send a scuba diver in to assess that. And I don't know if he made his way into the cave as well, but they would go down like this and up into the spring. And what we're learning is the old spring isn't the main spring anymore. The auxiliary spring is where more of the water's coming out of now. And so this is just talking to cave scientists, and they like to talk, but you know, if you listen, you learn so much from them. But only one instance of scuba diving I've heard of.
Okay, were there any other questions? Okay. Well, Jonathan, thank you so much.
Of course, thank you. If you find you have any questions or curious about tours or anything, or the Crystal Cave, or let me know, and I'll be glad to get you some information.
Great, fantastic.
Thanks so much, Jonathan.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. It
Very
was a
good.
pleasure.
Thank you also. Oh, I love doing this kind of